Hi, and welcome to another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I am co-host Chris Wells, and I'm joined today by co-host Michelle Gouveia. How's your day going?
Good so far. How about you?
Same. Yeah, just one thing to the next, but never bored. So I'm thankful for that. Um, Today we're going to talk about how automation enables insurance companies to increase customer satisfaction. So things like CSAT and Net Promoter Score. And I gotta confess, I don't know a whole lot about this. So
I will confess right along with you that my experience in this arena from my days in the insurance carriers was limited. So I'm sure we'll be more hypothetical and theoretical today than
yeah.
maybe we have in the past.
So if you're a listener and you have customer experience
Experience.
in the insurance industry, please let us know. We'd love to have you on the pod. Okay, so you have some limited experience, so let's start there, and then I'll ask a lot of naive questions, and we'll see where we get to.
So like I said, this is just what I'll call witnessed
Yeah.
or was adjacent to during my time at working within the insurance carrier space. Um, this was around, so I would say around 2014, 2015, at least at the carriers I was at. That's when there became a big push um,
Mm.
to improve the customer experience, right? There were whole organizations being stood up focused on how to better engage with the customer, how to improve, the net promoter scores or, um, you know, survey the customers more efficiently or more effectively
Yeah.
to then take those insights and help with claims workflows or help maybe even with product development, depending on what you were looking for. There were a lot of different flavors to it. I think a lot of it too was also around the time where uh, these I'll call them self-service portals were being stood up by the carrier. So this is, you can go buy your personal insurance online. And so that's a brand new uh, place to interact with the customer. And there was a lot of emphasis on building an omni-channel experience, right? Like if you've gotten to a certain point here and then you fall out of the system or you have to make a phone call, like how does that feel like one clean
Yeah.
transaction or process that you're not missing key steps or having to restart along the way. So that's from what I around that time, that's what I heard a lot about. And so the work that was being done, and at least initially around the areas that I work, a lot of process engineering about understanding the workflows and where these touch points with customers were happening. And so customer can be broadly defined, right? It can be the carrier's customer could be the broker or the agency that they're working with. In some events, the carrier could be a customer, and so the reinsurer might be doing this. And so there's a lot of work to be done to understand how do each of those interactions happen. And that process engineering work was being done to say, where do we interact with the customer today? What does that interaction look like? What is the information that we're capturing? What information will we like to capture that we're not? Um, and doing that along the whole process. There's also probably touch points that I guess you always want to talk to your customer whenever you can, but probably some that felt redundant or felt like not helpful, or the information wasn't being captured in a way that was useful. So a lot of mapping out where those things were happening. So that's kind of where I look at it from when I think about this Net Promoter Score customer experience side is where along those types of efforts would something like automation maybe be helpful.
That's that's interesting. I was sort of under the assumption that these things were most important or maybe solely important in the personal lines, but it sounds like you're saying um, same sort of thing, just a very different framework for like, the commercial lines and even reinsurance, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, but so even outside of I mean, definitely for personal lines, but you got to think about customer experience from the and the big obvious one, right, is claims handling, right? And you obviously get claims for all lines of business, and so you're still interacting with somebody. So what is their experience during the claims process? But there's also, the underwriting process, and what is it like to get all the information in for a submission? Is it easy? Is it a lot of back and forth? Is it super manual? Do you have a lot of pre-fill already enabled? How often do you have to talk to that person? So I think it hits more than just personal lines, but for sure as insurance customers, right, as consumers, where we're buying, you and I are buying our insurance, we're definitely doing it in the personal line side. So for sure, that's probably how we think most about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Around that same time, sort of that 2015, maybe through 2018 timeframe, both in the insurance space and in the asset management space, like there were a lot of initiatives going on to like, let's build the chatbot for to interact with. So like, whether it's someone, someone wants to rebalance their 401k, like, can we do that without a human involved? Down to buying your insurance, everyone was trying to build a chatbot, and I'm sure that's going to be revived today with GPT and friends, because most of those initiatives from what I had seen, again, sort of third party, stalled out, because it's a pretty hard problem to build a chatbot that people actually want to interact with.
Yeah, I think so. What we've seen in the space, just from in the VC world, is a lot of these chatbot technologies and now AI behind the scenes trying to improve it. Where the end state, right, is ultimately the chatbot can answer the inquiries as well as a human, where you don't have to eventually connect with a human, right? Like you just want everything, you want your questions answered quickly. You just want to know how do I do this, or how do I obtain this information? And that it's pretty smart to do that. But you can deploy the chatbot technology along a lot of those places, right? And I'll talk a little bit about some of the companies we've seen generally, in that there's the chatbot that you think about when you log into a portal or a website, and it's there. It's like, hey, I see you're searching this, or how can I help you, right? And you start interacting, and eventually you're like, I need to talk to somebody, right? Like that. There's like the first level of triage, or maybe even 2 or 3 levels of triage that these chatbots can do, and those are the outward facing chatbots, right? Which in a lot of ways is the result of some of this process mapping work, to say, like, where do we interact with the customer? What's easy, quick wins that we can do, where we don't have to have a huge workforce behind the scenes to answer those questions that are simple from our perspective. But then there's also and I'll talk a little bit about, we've mentioned before that there's 2 schools of thought on this, but that in some ways, a lot of people think that eventually small commercial insurance will be sold the way personal lines insurance is now, where it's mostly through online. And I think you had an initial swath of companies trying to act as a broker and help small business owners understand what types of insurance they needed. And so behind the scenes there, right, there's either a chatbot that's saying what kind of business do you have, where are you located, things like that, and then trying to offer up insurance recommendations, obviously with an engine behind the scenes. Or a lot of this, again, a customer interaction is providing more information. So a lot of those, those question marks in a little circle next to a field on a website that you're filling in, right? Like that to me is also a mechanism of customer engagement, and what's the experience you're providing to them, and do they feel like it's easy to work with you? Do they feel that it's an educational experience, that they're not getting duped in any way, right? And so this is pretty broad definition, I guess, of where you want your customer experience to come from.
Yeah, you touched on something there, which is, if people are confused about how they should answer the questions, part of doing these automations, right, is like make your process transparent, right? So, that's on the sort of underwriting side. Like, can we get the information in cleanly and accurately. And then on the claim side, like part of making the customer satisfaction go up on the claim side is just making your process not take a week, right? Make it easier for you and your people to do their jobs.
I think a lot of people would appreciate if it only took a week.
Yeah, right. Fair. No claims.
The claims professionals are going to come at me for that. But it is complicated, right? Like
Yeah.
to when a claim comes in the door, all of the associated workflows that come with that, and then if there's multiple parties involved, behind the scenes, everything's got to get all the information's got to come in, it's got to be exchanged, got to be connected. So there are real reasons for why things aren't just like this. But to your point, how transparent can you make that process so that ultimately at the end of the day, the customer feels that they've been heard and seen by the insurer, and that they're getting the best possible outcome that they can.
Yeah, a big part of it is like, don't come back to me with a question about what I've submitted as part of the claim, like way down the road, right? Like you already have all the stuff. Figure out if it's complete or not right away.
Right.
I've seen that a number of times. That leads to a ton of frustration.
Yeah, and some of it comes. This is getting a little outside of the net promoter score, like customer experience conversation, but into the claims workflow is because a lot of claims look different. Obviously, there's some kind of standard of like what documentation that do you need that comes in, but depending on there's no standard for like industries outside of insurance that are working with insurance to get you that information, right? So you might be working with a law firm that emails you everything, right? You might get a claim directly from the insured as opposed to them going to their attorney first, and the attorney is doing something on their behalf. So it's never just a straightforward interaction. And part of the challenge might be even recognizing that you've gotten everything. Like what are, and I not the expert in this, but what are the checks and balances that you have to say, we have received all of this information? And if not, like where is the automation that you can say, we've hit up against our, list of requirements, we're missing this. What is there an automated message that can go out either to the claim adjuster, or if you're interacting through, a carrier app or a portal, like how does that information get pushed to you so that you can get to that? And to your point, not go log in 3 weeks later and there's a big, red exclamation point that says this can't be done because you're missing 3 pieces of information that are key to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think there's an opportunity. Well, actually, let me phrase it this way. I've seen a lot of processes automated that involve large teams, and I'm sure underwriting and claims are no different from that. And one of the problems I see all the time is that the process depends on the person running the process. And so that, I don't know, just as a consumer, when I call, who knows, Verizon, and I talk to one person and then I call back later and I talk to someone and it's a different experience, like that's extremely frustrating.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that gets back to that's probably a whole separate episode on just like talent and training and but it does get to the customer experience side of in a lot of ways everyone thinks about these carriers as these huge massive companies, but the underwriters and the claims teams are really the main interactions with the end consumer, right? These companies have millions of dollars worth in like marketing spend and all that's great, but at the end of the day, you're calling a number and you're talking to someone that is representing the brand, but also
yeah,
could be having a bad day. You could be having a bad day, and so
making
to your
a
point,
claim, you probably are.
You probably are having a bad day. Good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to know systematically if like CSAT on the claim side is just lower than CSAT on the underwriting side, just inherently. That would be it's my hypothesis. Someone prove me wrong.
And where's so anyone dial in and just let us know. I think, so we're talking a lot about the individual and
Yeah.
how they connect with the care, or yeah, whoever they're talking to in the carrier side. But there's also the carrier and its interactions with its network of agencies and the brokers as well, right? So how easy is the carrier to do business with, right? Is it it's that same question of transparency, right? If the broker or the agent sends through a quote, right, how transparent is it to know where is that in the process with the underwriter? What is that response time from quote to bind, or quote to decision not to bind? What is the communication there? What's the channel by which that communication is happening?
Right.
And so that was getting to my point of a lot of this customer experience process engineering work was being done across all these various channels to say, how do we do it today? What's the end goal state, and then how far are we from doing that? And this was during a time where a lot of these at least the larger carriers, were going through this huge digital transformation effort and getting new core systems in, or new capabilities in. And so how did those things change and open up the conversation for better interactions with however they were defining the customer at that time?
Yeah, this is probably naive and silly, but it seems like these platforms for insurance, especially in the more complicated flavors of insurance, could draw inspiration from like the DoorDash app. Like we're cooking it, it's on its way. There was a problem, you got to talk to the deliverer, right? Like that's a pretty nice user experience, and it feels that, I mean, at the end of the day, there's some recipe for the insurance policy that you're buying and then binding.
Yeah.
Why not treat it that way, like a logistics?
Well, you hit on the DoorDash app example is a great example. The one that I think you hear a lot, or that I heard a lot around that time, was the Amazon experience.
Yeah.
Right. And that even got into, someone's buying an insurance policy, and it's, at the bottom is like, other shoppers have also searched for this or have purchased this, or like that image at the bottom of like what you're looking to buy plus two other items, right? And then look at the total package. There was a lot of conversation about how do we try to not try like how do we show what else, like who else is like you, right? Who else like you as an insured that has a similar profile? What are they buying, and then should you consider that too? A little bit of that trying to be educational, and how to help the consumer buy the insurance product. So, but yeah, a lot of those non-industry examples is what people were referring to when they were trying to say we as an industry want to improve customer experience. One question I had for you to get your thoughts on was, we hear a lot about the challenge of, and we've talked about unstructured data and everything else, but the challenge of extracting information and insights from what I'll just broadly call notes, right? Or text, right? You hear about a lot in claims is, a lot of the adjuster notes or conversation is logged in an open, free text, open format, which is just to your point, pretty much like an email. It's as unstructured as you can get, right? And I have to imagine that when you're depending on how you do it, even when you're surveying customers, there's some of that as well, because yes, there's like the simple, like rate your experience 1 through 10, but there's also, I've been on, calls where at the end of it, they say, will you take a brief survey? And then there's an option to essentially leave a voicemail or leave a message to give any additional feedback or color. And so just how do you capture that information? I think that, like, where can automation help? Where there I think technological gaps there. I haven't heard of anyone able to really do it, but you're more in the space than I am. So
I don't actually think of that as an automation problem. And I've had this conversation with a number of large companies in different verticals, including insurance, where it's like, we have all these chat transcripts, we have the emails with the same account, right? we want to know what's in them, and can your can your technology do that? And my response is always, at least first, well, what do you actually want to know? Like, what are the questions you're trying to answer? And the response I often get back is, well, we just want to know what's in there. It's like, well, okay, then you don't have an automation or a technology problem. You have an analysis problem. Like, you need to get all of this data in one place and then be able to slice and dice it, right? So, um, are you looking for correlations between tone, like sentiment, for example, and outcome? Are you looking for particular demographics or particular, initial questions that are asked in the chat that lead to certain outcomes? And that's the kind of thing where there's no tool that's going to be able to tell you exactly what those questions are. You have to figure them out. And that problem is solvable with a language modeling plus plus search technologies plus the ability to write good prompts for large language models can be very helpful for this. Of course, I don't get paid to mention them, by the way, but they're worth mentioning in this context. But even without the firepower of OpenAI, you could build these systems. The problem is folks don't want to go to the trouble of building out the system. They actually just want the genie that will come in and answer their questions about all of their data. The other issue is it's a massive data problem, right? So to get at some of those answers, you really want to know, like, here was the chat, here's everything else we know about the account, here was a call transcript, and by the way, we don't just want the transcript, we actually want the audio so we can figure out mood and sort of inflection of the words. So it's a
that's all. Sorry, because you're talking all about the interactions that are happening within someone sitting behind the desk that's getting all this too. But where you've got someone out in the field, a field adjuster that's got their own form. Maybe that's still manual. Maybe it's I'll call it a fillable PDF or some kind of structured document that is sending back in. But that's still getting attached to the claim. That's a whole different party that's involved, right? And so back to your point, it kind of goes back probably to like the legacy systems, and the infrastructure within these systems just wasn't set up to capture it that way. I can't speak to now kind of what they look like. I'm sure it varies by line of business and even within the carrier, right? Because you're probably doing some kind of customization of what are the fields that are important to you.
Yeah. And then there's always going to be like a blank paragraph at the bottom that you can fill in with whatever, and everyone treats that differently.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's tough for insurance because these companies were not. If an e-commerce company decided to become an insurer, I think they would be amazing at this, because in e-commerce you have to get this right. And my mental model for what makes CSAT go up in insurance is, to your point earlier about education, it's did everything happen fast according to whatever measure of fast I have in my head, and also a little bit of a delayed effect. Did I buy the right thing? Like, did you help me find the right thing? So Amazon saying like your peers bought this, really, really helpful. And so with that e-commerce mindset, those tools already exist, and also the data flows already exist. You know exactly what a customer profile is and how it can be meaningful, and you know how to pipe everything into a common repository so that you can query it and ask meaningful questions. I just don't think insurers are set up for that. But again, I'd love to be proved wrong.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that, and a lot of times too. If you think about it from, it's not necessarily the carrier that's having that interaction either, right? So it's the insurance agent that's able to sell, but they're also probably appointed with a number of carriers, right? And so you've got them working with you to help you understand what insurance you need, but there's also things going on in the background of who do they have the strongest relationship from an insurance carrier perspective. There's a question of the commission structure, and maybe that particular agent prefers to work with the carrier because they know they will get faster, quote to bind or something like there's a ton of factors that event that you have to pull on to get to the heart of what do we really need to change and improve to improve the experience for the end customer and every customer along the way. So it's very I don't want to call it siloed, but it's not a straight, clear process. There's a lot of, I'll call it links in the chain of like B to B to B to B to C kind of interactions. There may be an extra B in there. I don't know. But to your point from a few episodes ago, applying automation to a process that's broken, or you don't have clear insights or clear direction of what you're actually trying to get out of that process, it just doesn't make sense to automate it. So I think there's probably a lot of work that still people want to do and that needs to get done to apply automation to improve customer experience.
Yeah, I gave you the pessimistic answer. My optimistic version of answering that question is, if I were building this from scratch for an insurer today, I would start with what is all of the information, and you named a lot of it. What is all the information that I would need to map out what is a customer and what has that customer's journey been to date? That's where I would start. And then I would figure out like, okay, where's it all going to go? That's an infrastructure question and very answerable. And I would also figure out, of course, where are the gaps? So we see the customer's journey up to this point, and then they disappear somewhere and we don't hear from them for a long time. What's going on in there, and how could we learn more about that? And then they come back. And why did they come back? Was it a claim? Was it a policy expired? So you build that holistic picture. And now you've got this, not to get too deep into the weeds, but you've got this data structure that is like, here is the one file that is everything the customer does and how they're thinking about things. And now we can ask questions. Now we can do that exploratory analysis to say, when this happens at this point in the journey, just like Amazon does with their delivery trucks, they're doing this in that sort of middle mile of the delivery process. When the truck goes on this route, what happens to the delivery time and then the CSAT? Likewise, in the insurance journey, what happens when they reach this roadblock and their documentation wasn't correct, or they bought the wrong thing and they had to edit it. Then that broad question of what's in the data becomes possible to answer. So that's the optimistic.
You made me think of something. So we've talked a lot about just the experience from when there's an inbound from the insured, right? So something comes in to an underwriter that comes in from an agent or a broker, or from a portal from the insured, or there's a claim that comes in from the insured. But there's also what information does the carrier have, or do they need to capture to try and be proactive? And there's a lot of, it's really interesting. On how you identify customers and how you keep up, because to your point, you're only having certain interactions. Once that policy is bound, right, you're probably having minimal interactions unless something like a claim comes up, which just inherently they're having a bad day. So it's always going to be an associated like bad, quote unquote, bad experience. So how do you proactively try to engage with the customer? And also in my insurance days, I did a lot of work on projects on what types of services can we provide our insureds, that one is another touch point with them, but two, it improves their experience with us. So this could be, and a lot of carriers are working on this and have solutions for this, but you live in, in an area that's prone to hurricanes, right? And there's a hurricane that's, forecasted to hit. What do you get? The insurance carrier can reach out to you and say, looks like a hurricane is going to hit, in 3 days' time. Make sure you do da 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 at your home to prepare for it. Or, where are there places that, trying to be helpful, provide that type of information. The challenge with that, from a information that the carrier has perspective, is because you're so, I'll call it infrequently. That's probably not fair, but infrequently engaging with the with the insured.
Yeah.
The email may be out of date. You might not have a phone number.
Yeah.
It may not be the right phone number. Are you doing this via email, by mail, by text message? So there's a lot of ways that they can try and reach out to you. It's never a guarantee it's going to be there. So there's a lot of that data quality question around email and phone number, and a lot of debate going on of which is the right. If you can only collect one,
Yeah.
what is the one that you should be collecting? And there's ongoing discussion, debate, and challenges associated with those that I won't get into here. But I think that's a question too of how do you improve, CSAT and NPS, trying to be proactive and not just on the interactions that come in that are just by necessity already starting kind of off on the back foot because they're not great starts to why you're reaching out to the carrier.
No, absolutely. It's a massive master data management problem. And again, there are technologies for that, but I don't know that there are technologies for figuring out, like, does this customer prefer email over text? Although maybe demographics are helpful. Like, please don't ever email me anything. I can't have an unopened email in my inbox, so it's going away.
Yeah. Or I do not have a landline in my house. So,
yeah, exactly.
like, things like that. For sure. But yeah, I think this is an interesting area just because there's a lot of different ways that you can attack it. And I think, again, it could have been happening much, much sooner. I'm sure customer experience has been at the heart of insurance for a long time. But from my experience, the crux of it really hit in, the 2014, 2015 timeframe. That's when I was kind of around it and seeing all of these different roles and efforts kind of being stood up to try and improve it. And I think it was because of all of the new digital channels and ways people were shopping for insurance. And even that, to your point, the new demographic coming up to buy insurance for the first time, right? So all of that.
My daughter's going to want to buy her insurance by exchanging memes with someone, I'm pretty sure. So got to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, and we didn't even touch on this, but we've talked to some companies whose strategy is to use social media influencers to get their product out there in the market. And that, I am a millennial, but I'm the millennial that, like, I'm the older millennial, and so I didn't spend my entire life, exchanging on the web, and that to me is like brand new to me. But I recognize that now it's an actual career path to be, on social media and to have these types of engagements where you're representing a ton of brands and selling that. So that's a whole other set of questions on how the customer experience and those interactions, and how do you select people that are representing your brand to a whole new demographic.
Who's going to make the best unboxing video for your marine vehicle insurance you just purchased? So marketing wanted us to talk about how automation enables insurance companies to increase these metrics. I actually wonder if automation should be used to increase these metrics. I think there's a limit in the sense that, to your point earlier about the chatbots, eventually you're just going to be spamming, like, get me to a representative. And I think there's a question of, like, how far you should go with this and how much that should be involved. Because as much as I don't like calling up a vendor for help or whatever, someday you'll have to. And at that point, I don't want to have to figure this out for myself. I want to feel like I have a partner that's helping me through it. Right.
But a partner that has read your exchange with said chatbot and knows where you are in the process and then can just pick up where you left off as opposed to restarting.
The old handoff to 3 or 4 different departments. And it's like, okay, here's what we've been through. Here's why I'm mad now. Fix this piece. Yeah. Good. We've been all over the map here. I want to try to summarize for everybody before we roll this up. Okay. So, there was a period where this was a huge focus for insurance in the recent past, and now it's sort of coming up again, especially as we've been talking about intake on the underwriting and claim side. There are obviously chatbots have been deployed to varied measures of success. We talked about that. We also talked about how there is a strong belief that analytics on all of this multi-channel data that we have could be really powerful, but it's a struggle to formulate the right questions to ask, largely because of gaps in the data and understanding what a customer wants and needs and what state they're in their journey. And then I think finally we talked about optimism that we can get there. The insurance company needs a different mindset, a different analogy for that customer journey than what they're thinking about today. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you're spot on. I think the one thing I would add is that it's probably being worked on differently depending on what segment that you focus on or what channel you focus on, or whether it's underwriting or claims. And so again, I'll just put out the call. Again, if there's anyone listening that does this day to day and is focused on this, we'd love to chat with you about what you're seeing, what problems you're trying to solve, and your take on automation and how it helps.
Yeah, tell us how wrong we were.
Yeah. You might have to scrub this episode by the end of it.
Redacted.
But yeah, so I think we touched on a lot. So this has been another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody.